Good morning, everyone. I think we're going to get started, so if there are folks out in the chamber and want to trickle in, there's still a few seats on this side of the room, so feel free to grab those if you want. And welcome, everybody. My name is Ben Florsheim. I have the great honor of serving as mayor of the city of Middletown, and I am very, very happy to welcome you all here today and to say thank you very much for coming. This is a day that I have been looking forward for about 2.5 years, and I didn't anticipate that it would come in exactly this form, but that's kind of the story that we've all lived through over the last 2.5 years. And I just recovered from my first fortunately very mild bout with COVID, and I'll keep my mask on for everybody's benefit. And I am just throughout the challenges that the last couple years has brought, I am so gratified by the work and the collaboration that has happened around this project, which is really about the soul of Middletown and the future of our community. It is a generational project. It's really a multi-generational project because it is one that we have inherited. The current residents, the current citizens of Middletown have inherited from generations past, and we are really, really excited to present to you today the return to the Riverbend plan that we are going to be implementing over the next few years. And I want to start just by saying thank you to a lot of folks. Number one, to our master planning committee. Cooper Robertson, Langen, and CARP Strategies were a group that they were one of dozens of teams from around the country that wanted to be the partners for the city of Middletown as we moved forward on this project. They were one of many, many design firms, architecture firms, economic development firms from around the country who recognize the opportunity that Middletown's riverfront represents. And from that pool, our committee, our community selected this group, and I am so gratified, and I know that you are going to be so gratified when you see the amazing work that they have done to put us on the right path forward for our riverfront. So thank you to Cooper Robertson, thank you to Langen, and thank you to CARP Strategies, and you will hear exactly why in a few minutes. I want to thank the staff. There's many, many city staff at City Hall and around the city who have been a part of this. I want to particularly thank Joe Simolis, who is our recently departed director, recently left city service, let me clarify, director of economic and community development. It's really the same thing in Middletown, right? Who did an outstanding job in shepherding this project forward, as well as to Bobby Noel Peterson, who served as my chief of staff and is now acting director of economic and community development. She is with us virtually, and because she also came down with COVID just earlier this morning, but has been instrumental in this project. She wishes she could be here, and I will come back up in a few minutes to cover some of the points that she was going to cover in this presentation. Tom Morano, our economic development specialist, and Mark Kozakowski, our director of land use. There are many, many others, but the leadership that we have seen, that we have had in city government, from department to department, as we've actually restructured departments to make sure that this project would move forward and other projects would move forward as effectively as they could. And I'm just very grateful to have such an amazing team here at City Hall that I inherited in some parts and that we are in many ways also still continuing to build. And most of all, I want to thank you all as members of the public. Those of you who are here, those of you who are watching virtually, those of you who are catching up with this on the recording, those of you who have been here, we, as you will hear, heard from over 1,200 people across Middletown in various different formats, surveys that were collected at our physical storefront, online community workshops that took place, one-on-one stakeholder meetings that the city and our planning team had with different members of the sort of riverfront stakeholder community, and you're going to hear about all of that. And this would not have been possible. This community-driven plan would not have been possible without the input and the participation from you, the public. And lastly, I also want to thank my predecessors and the staff and the volunteers who have come before. Mayor Drew, Mayor Giuliano, who I see here, Mayor Thornton, Mayor Holtzberg, Mayor Sarah, going back administration after administration, there have been those who have recognized the need to make a generational effort to reconnect Middletown with, again, the soul of our city, the soul of our community, the reason that people settled here in the first place, the reason that that immigrants first came here, which is this great river and our connection to the river. So for having that long-term vision, for starting the processes that allowed us to make this plan and that are going to allow us to move forward, this has been a commitment by a whole community, and I'm very, very grateful for that. Next up, we are going to hear from somebody who I have been very proud to call a partner over the last couple of years, has been a part of our Riverfront Steering Committee, and let me also thank the whole steering committee that has been part of this plan, Laney Bank, Councilwoman Blackwell, Stephen Devoto. Thank you all for your guidance and participation. The public involvement in this project is really just going to grow after this. It's not going to shrink, and these folks have been instrumental in making sure that we put together a plan that would allow us to engage with the public in this way. But I'm going to introduce the fourth member of our steering committee, Larry McHugh, the president of the Middlesex Chamber of Commerce, to talk a little bit about how this group works. Larry, thank you for your partnership. Thank you all for being here. I'll talk to you in a few minutes. Coach.
Well, good morning, Middletown. As you notice, I always say the sun always shines in Middletown, Middlesex County, and it is shining today, and it will continue to shine as this project moves forward. Really, this project is a true testament to what can be done when a municipality and a community at large come together. First of all, as was touched by the mayor, I am very, very proud of the committee that I served on and the collaborative effort put forth by everyone on it. If you want to see a collaborative effort work, this is right here. Mayor Florsheim put together a fantastic working group representing different constituent groups throughout Middletown. Every individual on the steering committee brought the thoughts to each meeting, and we were able to come to a consensus as this project moved forward. As the mayor mentioned before, the city employees led by, I feel, this outstanding mayor in this city, a risk taker to go forward with projects like this that will have an impact not 1 year, but 20, 40, 60 years in the future. First of all, Joe Samoas was mentioned. Bobby Noel Peterson, Mike Karzakowski, and Tom Morano, who is always behind the scenes and never needs applause, but's there all the time. I also want to thank Elaine Bank, Stephen Devoto, Jeanette Blackwell, and the mayor. It was great working with this group. Every one of these individuals are dedicated to making Middletown a better place to live, work, and play. I would be remiss if I didn't thank the consulting team led by Mike Ariz from Cooper Robinson, Carp Strategies, and Langen Engineering. They deserve an A+ for this. When I was a teacher, I never gave an A+ out, so that's how good they are. In fact, I don't think I ever get an A out. Right, Jack? Yeah. As the mayor touched base on, just think of this number, 1,200 people involved in this process. 1,200. Middletown residents from all over our great city. And everyone had the same thought process. Getting back to our history, the riverfront, that for decades has not been accessible. As we move forward with this project over the next many years, we will be looking at public and private investment. It's very important that we connect our vibrant downtown to the riverfront. We can have passive recreation and active recreation. Just enjoying nature, hiking, biking, canoeing, and then organize recreational activities. This riverfront will be a idea and a place for everyone to enjoy. That means everybody in this community. And we have to look in the future to investors to come into this community for both residential and commercial uses, because that is a key to the plan. We do need commercial tax generating properties and also more employment. This is an unbelievable, exciting time for our great city. And I want to thank each and every one of you here today to take time out of your busy 4th of July weekend. This shows the difference of Middletown to other communities. People are willing to give up their time and energy to make our community a better place to live and work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Coach. I'm back for a couple minutes, and then we're going to hear directly from our consulting team. And I think at this time, if we can get the slides up on the screen, that would be great, and that will change over for those viewing virtually as well. And we'll go just to the next slide. Thank you very much. So, perfect. I also want to briefly acknowledge, again, a couple other people who are here, and I appreciate their presence and their involvement. We have two members that I can see, as well as Councilwoman Blackwell, who's sitting up here, of our Common Council, Councilman Phil Pacina, Councilman Ed McKeown. Thank you for being here. Kellen Atherton and Rich Pelletier are here from our Planning and Zoning Commission, as well as Commissioner Giuliano. If I've missed any commissioners, I apologize. Thank you to Chief Traskey from South Fire for being here. Again, it's a collaborative effort, and all of these people have been involved. All of them will be part of it, and all of you will continue to be part of this evolution. So thank you for all those who are serving in these roles and being a part of our progress in Middletown. So, what is a master plan and what isn't it? I think it's important to tell folks that this is not a final design. What you are about to see is not necessarily represent exactly what buildings are going to look like, exactly where they're going to be situated. What it represents is a tool for us to use to make sure that we have the right zoning language, legislative language, and eventually when it comes to this, that we have the right construction, development, architectural partners operating within the framework that the community has established for what types of resources we're going to have at the riverfront, what types of activities, what the design language is going to look like. And as many of you know, it has been the project or the product of a long-standing effort to develop a plan that would enable us to move forward. Starting, there's many dates that you can point to as a starting point, but in 2000 there was a city-sponsored charrette called the Mullen Report that resulted in a vision document that sort of was the basis for a lot of speculation and hope and imagination for what the riverfront could be, but there were a number of obstacles in the way to actual implementation, one of those being the existence of the old water treatment facility on the riverfront. In 2014, many of us participated in the Project for Public Spaces Riverfront Project, which was a series of charrettes conducted in town and online to get visions for what the public elements of the riverfront would look like, what the parks, what the free use areas of the riverfront would look like, could look like, should look like, but did not contain plans for implementation and moving forward. The Project for Public Spaces report, along with the Middletown Riverfront Redevelopment Commission final report, which was a city commission impaneled to look for economic opportunities along the riverfront, those were the sort of guiding documents, the starting principles for the Return to the Riverbend initiative when we started, taking the vision and the concepts and the ideas and moving them towards an actionable plan that we've arrived at today. And all of this has happened against the backdrop of the development of our Plan of Conservation and Development, which is a 10-year document that the city had worked on for a number of years leading into 2020, has now been adopted and is really based around the vision for the riverfront and the vision for the downtown area to serve as sort of a community connection, as a community destination, as a place to build opportunities for people to be together. So we'll go to the next slide. This is also happening at a time, as you know, that there's lots of activity happening in the downtown and on the riverfront area in general. And a number of the projects noted here are happening in conjunction with the planning process. Some of them are happening outside of the study area that Cooper Robertson looked at, but they all are part of this renaissance and of this redevelopment project. As folks are aware, there have been various plans put forward by the Department of Transportation for the removal of the lights on Route 9. And the Department of Transportation is continuing to study traffic usage, traffic patterns, attempting to come up with a plan and are getting ready to present some concepts to the public for what that would look like and how it would serve both the interests that the region, the county has, but also how it would serve Middletown and the riverfront area. Folks have hopefully had an opportunity to see and enjoy the improvements that we're already making at Harbor Park, the replacement of the boardwalk and the railings, the renovations that are happening at 80 Harbor Drive, and we are very excited to get that opened up and back open for business. So that's the Canoe Club redevelopment that you see on here. We are continuing with design work for a community boathouse, which you'll hear more about how that factors into the overall plan in a few minutes. We are interviewing next week candidates for development at the arcade site, which you see on this map, located behind the police department, which will also likely serve as one of the primary pedestrian connections over Route 9 onto the riverfront, and that's something that, again, you'll hear about more today and as part of the plan and as part of our conversations with the Department of Transportation as it relates to reconfiguring Route 9. We have been on a decade-long project to decommission the wastewater treatment plant that is located just adjacent to the bank of the river, was deteriorating, needed to be replaced, and instead of building on that site and locking it up for preventing this project from moving forward the way that it needed to, we were able to enter into a regional partnership, change the way that our wastewater is handled, and come up with a new vision for the use of this site. We have a federal grant from the EPA where we are doing assessment for contamination at some of these sites along the riverfront, which had industrial history, which had contamination. And that assessment is then going to allow us, as we have this master plan in hand, to turn back around to our partners in the federal government, get the cleanup money, get the remediation money, and get the projects underway. And finally, we have been acquiring property, including the Jackson Corrugated site, another post-industrial site, which is really, its location is key, its location on River Road is key, and it is incredibly important that all of the development partners, especially all of the private sector partners that we enter into with this project, understand that it is part of a larger community vision, and that their work will serve the larger vision in the community, not just the profits, not just the ends that developers have in mind when they are looking to make those projects. So having control of the sites and working with those developers in advance, making sure that we choose the right partners, just as we did with Cooper Robertson and Langen and Carb Strategies, is going to be crucial. So control of the property, acquisition of the property has been a key focus over the last couple of years. Next slide. And then lastly, just to talk again a little bit about where we are in the process. Like I said, master plan does not equate to final design. This is now a document that we can use to work with within the city and without to establish what the final design will look like for these sites, and that will be happening after we after we adopt the plan as the preferred plan that you'll hear about today, after we adopt the zoning language that will allow us to then go to the private sector, go to the federal government, go to the state government, and talk about what the plans are going to be. And we'll hear more, you'll hear more in a minute about sort of the different elements of that and how far along they are in terms of concept to reality. But I think it's important for folks to understand that, number one, this is not the end of the process for public involvement. We are, again, going to need to continue to hear from you and to have your support and your oversight and your feedback and your thoughts. And so the avenues for that we're going to continue to communicate about. And the long-term future of the riverfront is only going to be successful if we have appropriate oversight, appropriate committee structure or authority structure to make sure that it works. So you'll be hearing more about the logistical side of that in the months to come. But what I want to do right now, and I've been, again, excited for last 2.5 years to do, is turn it over to our team from Cooper Robertson to hear about what exactly our vision for the riverfront is, what your vision for the riverfront is. Again, it's a great pleasure to have the opportunity to work with all of you. And at this time, I'm going to invite Mike Aziz up to take over the slides. So thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. All right. Well, it is such a pleasure to be here this morning. We too have been looking forward to this day for a long time. Brianna, do you mind putting the slides back up? We could take this moment for folks to trickle in. We do have seats on the far side of the room. If anyone would like to come in, come on in. Plenty of seats. Again, my name's Mike Aziz. I'm a partner with Cooper Robertson. We're an architecture and planning firm based out of New York City. And it's been such a great privilege to work with Middletown, with this steering committee over the last 12 months. I'm representing a much larger team, many of which are in the room today. Folks on our team, just give a raise of the hand. There you go, you could see them. I'm sure there's many more on Facebook watching online too. It has been a tremendous honor, to say the least. Starting with this tremendous steering committee, which has been so engaged, dedicated, and committed to working on this process for the citizens of Middletown, and extending to all the residents, the business owners, the city staff who contributed their time, effort, and ideas. We offer sincere gratitude and congratulations on a job well done. We're really excited to share it with you today. So I'm going to begin by walking everyone through the process of how we got here today, what we would call building the vision. I'll talk about who was involved and how people were involved. It was clear from the onset that the city would put the community at the center of this process. The city was tasked, the community rather, was tasked with translating the city's initial goals into a physical master plan. Those goals included making the waterfront better connected and universally accessible, vibrant and mixed use, attractive for investment, inclusive and engaging, and healthy and sustainable. A great starting point for the process. Working with the community was a very iterative process. We were continually sharing out, gathering input, all at various points along the way, and ultimately leading to a plan that was shaped by you, the city of Middletown. To gather the community's input, we used a variety of different strategies, from social media to large community workshops to a design gallery over at Main Street Market right next to Perk on Main. We gathered over 1,200 comments from hundreds and hundreds of community members. We held over 100 meetings over the last 12 months. That design gallery is still there at Perk on Main. It was where we received hundreds of comment cards. You can see pictures of them on the screen here. And we read every single one. But apologies to whomever requested a sea monster in the water and a gladiator ring. We couldn't quite find the space for those two pieces. We just updated the gallery yesterday with all these great new materials. There's a large-scale physical model there for you. So we invite you to go over, check it out after this meeting. It'll be open for the rest of the month. So others that were engaged. In addition to the community at large, special attention was paid to engaging folks from all across the city, especially those who may have been underrepresented in past planning efforts, including the North End community groups, riverfront residents and property owners, and the Wongonk, the original indigenous people of this area. Additionally, key state agencies, Wesleyan, CVH, local historians, and the local development community were part of the process. The result of the outreach is a plan that represents the diversity of voices in this community, the passionate opinions that are held, and deep local knowledge that was brought to the table. These unique perspectives came together to create a plan that promises to both be equitable and achievable. Our early conversations and workshops led to the formation of 8 guiding principles. Guiding principles in master planning are a really important tool in the design process. They're used to measure the relative success of any concept that we may draw. It's a scorecard, if you will, for how various designs measure up to the community's expectations. So I'll read through them quickly for you. 1, create a Middletown riverfront that reflects the community's interest and honors its past. Create a rich network of public spaces that are accessible to all. Plan for a diversity of land uses that attract investment and complement, not compete, with downtown in the region. Connect the riverfront with upland neighborhoods, both visually and physically. Promote environmental stewardship and community health. Design places that are compatible with downtown in both scale and character. Create economic opportunities for all, including traditionally disadvantaged communities. And plan for development to be funded and constructed in discrete phases. Very important point for a site that's almost 220 acres. And so with those guiding principles in hand, we went off to design with the community. And here are the results. A vision for your waterfront. So I'll underscore some of the disclaimers that were put forward before. These are just design concepts. They're sourced from the community. We vetted them through economic, physical, regulatory lenses. And while they have great rigor and we believe they're all viable, they're just concepts. Subsequent phases of design and approvals will be needed to bring any of these to reality. But we're going to close this meeting with some early actions and some immediate actions that you could see changes being made in the near term that catalyze this future development. So shown here are the 220 acres of the study area that we defined as the riverfront for this master plan. It stretches from Harbor Park down to former Long River Village site in the Rushford Center, and it goes from the shoreline back to Silver Street in Route 9. The area itself has a series of environmental and ownership conditions that have really shaped this plan. It's a riverfront setting. It has an industrial past. So that's led to 44% of this area having some type of environmental condition to deal with. But 70% of the land is under public ownership, making remediation mitigation efforts imminently more viable. And 100% of the shoreline is owned by the city without any active uses south of Harbor Park, making the whole plan much, much more viable. Those underlying conditions and the land uses in place led to the formation of 4 planning districts. Each district has their own character in relationship to the water. Each are about a 5-minute walk from edge to center. That's the size of a great urban neighborhood, and for context, in Middletown, that's a walk from Washington Street to Union Street. So these are nice, walkable neighborhoods. The districts are separated by key environmental corridors or major streets to bring you to the water, like Eastern Drive. Each district has a location for a special gateway that greets someone as they come to the water, or a moment at the waterfront itself for a special amenity. From north to south, the districts are Riverside at the foot of downtown and location of Harbor Park today. Sumner Brook, a low-lying area at the bend in the river. The Hilltop, a riverside portion of the CVH campus with commanding views of the river. And South End, a sloping site layered with existing city infrastructure. After hearing from the community what types of uses and programs they wanted to see at the waterfront, our team took those ideas and tested different programs and buildings across these different districts, determine which ones would be most appropriate in which location. And what resulted was this conceptual plan, which we then brought back to the community for their feedback. Riverside is shown as an active, rejuvenated park district and a gateway to the riverfront. Sumner Brook is a new eco-neighborhood with a wide range of uses, bustling riverfront amenities. The Hilltop remains an institutional campus, but with potentially enhanced public access and community programs. The South End, a new mixed-income neighborhood built around community-scale agriculture and reconnected to the waterfront. The design concepts for these 4 districts result in an astounding nearly 50 acres of new and improved park space. For scale comparison, Union Park today, 1.3 acres. Harbor Park is about 8. So this is a major increase in the amount of public space for the Middletown community to enjoy at the riverfront. We polled the community early on and asked them what they'd like to see in new park space. And what we heard the strong desires were for the park spaces to be multi-generational, to be both active and passive, for those quiet spaces to exist at the waterfront. And they wanted to be connected to one another through a system of trails and parkways and greenways. And they wanted to be large enough to hold big community events. To meet those goals, the master plan proposed a range of different park spaces, from large parks like the 16-acre Riverfront Bend Park, which you see right in the middle of this diagram, to smaller and quieter spaces like the Wetlands Park. The big parks would be sized for playgrounds, climbing areas, pickleball courts, which we understand are popular, dog runs, etc. And these parks are connected by fully accessible and bike-friendly pathways, 7 miles of those pathways, in fact, which when we polled the community, they said that was their #1 request, a bike-friendly waterfront with pathways connecting all the open spaces. We also heard that the shoreline should be completely public and activated by water-based uses. The master plan proposes new amenities at least every quarter mile or 5-minute walk across the waterfront. Some of those amenities include new motorboat and paddleboat access, which would be separated for safety, public docks, multiple viewing and fishing overlooks, retail and restaurant space, and of course the 2-mile promenade that connects it from tip to tail. The first space most visitors will encounter is the Union Street Gateway. Let's take a look at some of these individual spaces. One second, there we go. So the Union Street Gateway is where Union Street meets River Road and Sumner Brook. As you can see from this photo in the street view on the bottom, the banks of the brook are overgrown, the views of the river obscured today, but it has the potential to be a great new civic entry point to the river. And so here's the community's design vision for a bold new riverfront gateway at that location. We think that it's a great place to have an iconic new public plaza that honors the Wongonk people and their historic relationship to the river. A large-scale Wongonk-inspired art piece is shown here on axis with Union Street. Union Street itself would have new bike lanes, public art on the underpass coming in. It would all announce that you're coming to a new riverfront. The art could foreground a larger circular memorial boardwalk over a widened mouth of the Sumner Brook. Adjacent areas provide access to the brook and places to sit or fish along the riverfront promenade. As we move a little bit further south from the gateway, we come to an area referred to as Riverbend Park. 16 acres, this would be the largest new park. It stretches from Union Street to Walnut Street and from the shoreline all the way back to Route 9. It's bisected by River Road and the rail. And the rail itself is planned to stay in operation, perhaps even take on some leisure rail activities like the Essex train line in the future. On the water side of River Road is an area referred to as Riverbend Landing. It includes the rehabilitated wastewater treatment plant buildings converted to new retail, restaurants, and community program uses. Framing either side of the treatment plant or buildings, are public boat docks, a boat launch, and a civic-size event lawn to take in the views of the Aragoni Bridge and areas to the north. Across River Road is Riverbend Nature Park. It provides direct access to the brook, a 4-season recreation center, and a municipal garage to park some of the visitors coming to the area. And additional commercial and retail opportunities also exist here too. Here's a view of the Nature Park area today. Currently home to active industrial uses and existing buildings. And here's a vision of how the park could look on a winter day. You'll see in a second. There we go. Hosting a winter festival, maybe next to a temporary ice skating rink sheltered from the river's winter winds. The park provides generous areas for playgrounds, ball courts, all those things we talked about. And a paddle boat center is shown on the banks of the brook. In the foreground is one of several planned transit hubs connecting the river to downtown in the north end. This could also be the new location of a municipal garage and public safety station. Let's move slightly south here, down to the Jackson Corrugated site. The Jackson Corrugated site has about 4 acres of wetlands on it today. The city owns this site, and there's a real opportunity to include it in the new park system. What has been reimagined with the community has a new wetlands park, 4 acres of it, with boardwalks weaving through restored wetlands connected to a new mixed income housing community shown here in the distance. The location delivers on 2 things that we heard from the community. 1, a desire for native and natural landscapes. And 2, areas for bird watching and pollinator pathways. So it delivers on both of those. And lastly, the park could be named for the Wangang Sachem Sohag, a tribal leader who's thought to have resided in this area. So now we walk through all of the park and open space ideas. Let's talk a little bit about the development opportunities. So we listened very closely to the community's interest with regards to development, and we crafted a plan that treads lightly on the land, builds densely and sustainably, and provides a rich mix of uses that are aligned with projected market and economic conditions in Middletown. With regards to housing, we heard affordability and access to first-time home ownership were key. We also heard a strong preference for mid-rise apartments and townhomes as opposed to single-family and high-rise. We took that feedback and sized new housing areas to meet Middletown's projected downtown needs over the next 2 decades. The 2 areas proposed for housing are Long River Village, which you see on the southern end of this screen, and Jackson Corrugated off of Eastern Drive. Each of these areas could also support some small-scale neighborhood retail. A Discovery and Exchange Center could be located in the Riverbend landing area. This provides a location for the community's interest in a riverfront youth center that could be paired with shared educational space for Wesleyan, Middlesex Community College, and other local education groups. Lastly, the Riverbend Park area could provide a location of commercial and retail space to fulfill existing market needs. We know that riverfront retail and restaurant space, small business incubator space, outdoor recreation retailers, and appropriate light industrial are all areas identified as growth opportunities for Middletown's future, and they're all aligned with what we heard were the community's interest. So once again, let's take a closer look at some of the design concepts for each of these areas. First, we'll take a look at Jackson Corrugated site. So here's the site today. We all know Meadow Meat. It's shown here in the foreground. The rail and River Road are also here. And Eastern Drive is just on the left-hand side of the image. Here's a vision of what it could look like with the new overlook at the end of Eastern Drive. In a moment. Place for small community, it's large enough for small community events. It'd be a great spot for the annual carp fishing tournament. Meadow Meat here is shown with new rooftop access, fronting a community park framed by mid-rise apartments and townhomes. They all have active ground floor uses and sustainable design features as part of their design. The 2-mile promenade runs along the shoreline, making connections up to the public dock and Riverbend landing area. Let's take a look at that area next. So here's a design sketch of the Riverbend landing area. We've talked about this a little bit. You see the wastewater treatment plant buildings that are being reused here on the right-hand side. They're surrounded by new amphitheater, lawn, and plaza spaces. You also see the concept of new public docks and a boat launch. This location was recommended by the harbor master for its relatively quiet and calm waters at the Riverbend and the location of the channel being further out from the shoreline. It also provides residents with what we heard they really wanted, which was a local alternative to going across the river to Portland to put their boat in. So here's a view of that area today, looking back towards downtown. You can see the courthouse in the distance and the wastewater treatment plants here in the foreground. And here's what it could look like on a night like, I was going to say today, but I guess it's tomorrow now. You see lawn areas, restaurants, amphitheater spaces, all mixed in together, a great place to take in the fireworks. The two buildings shown here on the left are large. They're large enough for tenants like beer halls, restaurants, indoor markets, those kind of destinations that would bring the Middletown community, but also others from the county and the region down to the riverfront. One area we haven't touched on is the south end, where the Long River Village, former Long River Village community is. Oops. This district is centered around a sloping Middletown Housing Authority site up on the hill. This was the location of the Long River Village community, originally built in 1942 for World War II workers, demolished in 1999. The site still is connected to all the city infrastructure, sweeping views of the water, really a prime site for new housing downtown. The planning team met with both the authority and former residents of the community to develop this plan, which envisions a mixed income neighborhood built around the concept of shared garden spaces. The garden spaces both honor the community's original victory gardens and the stated need for more fresh food options downtown, which we heard across the board. A memorial to the former community is proposed in the Central Plaza that connects the riverfront down to an environmental education park on the banks of the river. And just to the left of that is another public boat launch at the end of Silver Street. In the last section here, we're going to talk about what might be the most important theme today, which is connections, reconnecting the community with the river. We heard from community members throughout the process that the connections to the river were going to be just as important as what ended up there. Our team drew from the great work that the Middletown Complete Streets Committee did. We met with city staff. And we developed a plan for several riverfront circulation loops, as we're calling them. The loops would offer over 3 miles of new bike lanes downtown, improved sidewalks on city streets, new riverfront bus service, and 3 transit hubs to seamlessly go from downtown in the north end by bus to bike or on foot. The extent of the loop and its connections to the north end ensure this is going to be an equitable and fully accessible connected waterfront. The most exciting project, which I think we foregrounded here a little bit, is a potential pedestrian bridge over Route 9 into Harbor Park. The bridge would be at the location of a former street. Some of you may remember Center Street that existed downtown. It's between Dingwall and Court, going from Main to Tacovin. The alignment partially exists today with the Riverview Terrace next to the police station. So the idea is to extend the terrace at the level of Riverview, the bridge at the level of Riverview Terrace, along the arcade site, which the mayor talked about, over Route 9 and into Harbor Park. We think this is really a great idea. We went and we met with DOT multiple times to discuss this. As you know, they're in the midst of planning improvements to Route 9, and we're happy to say they're enthusiastically supporting this concept as part of their future planning for Route 9. And in community outreach, we asked the community what they would want to see in this bridge. And what we heard was that it should feel like an extension of Harbor Park, like Harbor Park was brought back into the city and into Main Street. So what we're planning is a green inverted connection, almost 1,000 feet long, like the Shelburne Falls Bridge in Massachusetts, which was brought to us by the Middletown Garden Club as a great reference. So the bridge itself. Here's a view of what that bridge could be. Over an acre and a half of elevated park space, lush plantings, as I said, almost a quarter mile from Main Street into the park. It has a dynamic form that orients visitors' views both to the north in the bridges and to the south to the Great Bend in the river. It soars over Route 9. It could be a gateway to the riverfront, but also a gateway to Middletown itself. You could have signage. Its unique form itself just announces that you've come to a special place. At 80 feet wide, it's wide enough to host community events in a sunken amphitheater. It's a cue we've taken from the High Line in New York, where we're from. It's likely to be a major tourist attraction. The Shelburne Falls Bridge garners some 60 to 70,000 visitors a year, a major boon for that city and its county, much like this could be for Middletown and Middlesex. It's a great economic impact. The arrival to the park is going to be just as important as the bridge experience itself. Here's a view of the general location of where the park would actually land, where the bridge would actually land in the park. And a final concept to share about what that could look like in the future. The idea would be that you'd have an overlook that overhangs Harbor Park and gives you those great views up and down the river. You'd have a monumental stair that unfolds into the park for sitting, lounging, just taking in those river views and breezes. The elevated park has those panoramic views. You could have periscopes up there to take views across the river. It makes it also an ideal location given its presence as a gateway to reflect on Middletown's role in the transatlantic slave trade that happened just at this location. With a pair of middle passage markers, we're showing framing a plaza in new lawn spaces to activate this area. Sound from Route 9 could also be discreetly mitigated with a combination of landscape berms and sound walls. They're designed not to block those views from the river, but keep the sound down in Harbor Park itself. So that wraps up our design vision portion of the presentation here. I'd once again want to thank the community on on engaging with us, congratulate you on a job well done. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you over the last year. Now I'm going to hand it over to Marek Kazakowski, Director of Land Use, to discuss where the community goes from here, how you bring this to reality. Thank you all.
Okay. All right, thanks, Mike. Okay, hello. Okay, so I'm both Mark and Marek Kazakowski, and I am the Director of Land Use for the City of Middletown and the City Planner for Middletown. I started here just under 3 years ago, about a month before our mayor, and I want to say that it was the potential for the riverfront that really drew me to Middletown. That made me want to come here, work, provide my services, and really make a great place out of our riverfront. So before I get started, I do want to thank Mike and the team assembled for assisting the city. There you are. With this plan. I'd like to thank the steering committee and the mayor and the staff for their insights. I've really learned a lot about Middletown just by hearing their input in this process. I do want to take a moment to recognize Tom Morano standing over there by the door. He's the city's economic developer and two-time CEDAS member of the year. I want to thank him for his contribution to the plan. Without Tom's effort, we wouldn't be here today, and I want to thank him again for putting off his retirement until we rolled out this plan. His last day with the city is next Friday, the 8th. So thanks, Tom. You will be missed. We love you too. Now we want to talk about the realization of the vision that Mike painted for us today. In preparation for today, Bobby made an analogy that this process is a marathon, and we are in the first leg of this race, and we have a long way to go. But thinking more about that analogy, I want us to back up even more and say that the effort to this point was really the training that was needed in order to prepare us to run this marathon. If anyone participating today here has run a marathon or has completed some other endurance feat, you will know that it's the hard work that you put in to the race that is necessary to prepare for a successful race. So Middletown's training, if I may, has a history of starts and stops, good days and bad days. But today we shift from training to race day, excited, prepared, and with a plan. Today we put rubber to pavement and move forward with the implementation and action to realize this vision. First, the next challenge is to create enabling legislation in our zoning code to allow and establish requirements to encourage the development, including in our vision. Tom would always tell me to zone for what you want, and that will be the goal for the upcoming code amendments. The Planning and Zoning Commission recently adopted zoning code changes related to our mixed-use zones, which did impact some land on the riverfront study area, which was primarily in the Sumner Brook District. That's a start, but there's more to go. The next step is going to be working with the Commission on zoning code changes to create the regulatory framework for the uses, types of building, bulk, yards, design criteria that will both accommodate and facilitate the realization of this vision. Oh, there, oops, too far. I think we all agree that it is important to identify some early action items that show that this plan is a plan that's moved forward and not put on a shelf. These actions should be immediate or soon and visible to the public. Some early projects have actually been completed or are currently being worked on. These include boardwalk improvements and environmental remediation around the boathouse. The building at 80 Harbor Drive is currently under extensive renovations. We already have some programming on the riverfront and with opportunities to expand that. We found that we have a dredging project at the location of the proposed public docks that's on the priority list with the Army Corps of Engineers, and we're working to move that up their priority list. As mentioned earlier, we already solicited RFQs for development of city property, the arcade site, which will be critical in the design and development of the pedestrian bridge over Route 9. We worked with the state to get in buy-in on the bridge and working with RiverCog to identify the project as a priority transportation project on a regional level. The city has acquired key properties in the riverfront area, which will enable the city to have greater control of how they are developed. We have also identified some short-range projects that can further show progress, including adding signage and artwork and sidewalk improvements at the Union Street Gateway. Personally, I look forward to getting started on the planning on the public improvements, specifically the Sumner Brook Bridge and the Wangok Memorial. These projects will be visible, beautiful, and serve as keystones for much of the rest of the implementation of the Riverfront Plan. There we go. Staying involved. There will be ample opportunity to engage through the public process and move forward with the vision. The first and immediate, which will be the zoning code changes, which will be reviewed through the public hearing process. I look around the room and I see many individuals who volunteer their times on boards and committees and commissions, and all in the effort to make Middletown a better place, and I thank you. Many of you also participated in this master plan process, and I thank you again. I want you to all rest assured that just because we've prepared this plan and presented it today, that is your continued involvement in the process that is required for the successful implementation of the vision. Through implementing the Riverfront Master Plan, I hope to build partnerships and work through the various boards and committees and other groups in the community, working on the common goal of making the riverfront a vibrant, accessible, and meet its potential to be great. And now I think I want to pass the floor to the mayor for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody. And we are just, again, very excited for what this represents and for the fact that, as Mark said, as you heard, we can choose whatever metaphor you want, but we are at the beginning of the next phase of this race, right? We are at the end of the beginning of this riverfront process, and I've probably said that before at different junctures, but this is really an important step. It's going to give us the tool that we need to get the development interest, to get the funding, to get the right zoning language, and really ultimately to get the right finished product, which will be an ongoing project. Always driven by the community, always driven by the values that I think have driven what has made this possible. So I want to say thank you again. We do have time now for some questions. We have, of course, our planning committee, our consultant team here. At 11:30, I invite folks to head over and check out the storefront that was mentioned at Main Street Market, right behind Perk on Main. So you'll be able to see some of the three-dimensional concepts, visit and see some of the updated input that we are trying to get back from the residents. And then at 12 o'clock, for those who are signed up for the trolley ride, there is going to be, the courtesy of Middletown Area Transit, we are going to have a trolley tour of the sites that you just heard about on the riverfront. I believe that that is now booked full, but for those who have tickets for that, 12 o'clock at the terminal, right, the MAT terminal, that will be departing down for the riverfront. But we are now happy to take any questions that folks have, and I will do my best to delegate to the right folks who can answer them. So we'll start right here.
When bike paths and pedestrian paths are together, it's like pedestrians get nervous they're going to be run over by bikers. Is that addressed, and if so, how?
So the question was about pedestrian and bike safety. Mike, you want to take that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. When you have one person going at a slower speed, another on a bike coming by, it creates safety issues. And so the riverfront promenade itself is absolutely wide enough to accommodate both in separate lanes. The streets were conceived as having various different types of bike facilities, some dedicated bike lanes, some shared bike lanes with vehicular traffic. But the trails are recommended to all be wide enough to safely accommodate both. You'd have one side appropriate for bikes and mobility scooters that are moving faster, and others for folks who are sitting on benches or walking along the way. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We just finished the Portland Bridge, and one of the main concerns was having gates and areas to make sure that people didn't jump off the bridge. I don't see any protection on the bridge going over 91 to keep people from just walking off or jumping off onto the highway.
I think that's because they're shown as glass at the moment. But no, you're absolutely right. That's a safety concern for any elevated bridge. And what we've shown, if you look really closely, is that you'll see some large glass panels that run the length of the bridge, so that that wouldn't be the case.
Are they great-proof?
Shatterproof. Well, as I said, this is just a concept design at this point. The design and engineering of the bridge would be happening at a subsequent phase. So I'm sure there are standards that DOT would hold a pedestrian bridge to, and you design to those standards.
Yes, I know things aren't set in stone, but I'm trying to visualize, based on his question, the bridge that goes like riders.
No, actually, it's only a pedestrian bridge. Bikes are welcome, but only if they're dismounted. We did. Yeah. Bike and walking, and there'd be elevators at either end. I think I failed to mention that for anyone who needs that.
There will be places where you can stay on your bike, but on that place you would be
Yeah.
in the back here.
I have a question with regards to fishing and launching a boat and traffic into Middletown. If that was a destination for my boat, where am I going to park and launch and leave the trailer? And if I am on the other side of Middletown, there is no bike path for me. I'm in Westfield, and I'm riding down here. It's all uphill. I'm considering I'm going to park here, pull my bike out. Where am I going to park, and am I just going to...
Sure. So the boat launch facilities are shown in two locations that the Harbor Management Plan recommended. One at the bend in the river, and one down where Silver Street meets the river. Both of those would have parking directly adjacent to the boat launches. The parking, because it's down in the floodplain, we hope it would be designed with pervious pavement, something that is appropriate for a flood-prone area. But there'd be two parking areas directly adjacent to the boat launches. The idea of where you would park if you were just a visitor. There are two parking garages that would be utilized for this riverfront development. One, on the arcade site, which is something the city's been talking about for some time. And another one is proposed to be at Walnut Street and River Road on the OMO industrial site that's there today. So between those two, they make up the majority of the parking demand for the riverfront. Also on-street parking in some smaller lots, but no big surface lots. We heard from the community very early on, they did not want to see of parking at the riverfront. So we definitely heeded that advice.
And maybe I didn't understand, but I'm a rower, so I'm at the rowing. Where would we park?
The parking in Harbor Park would not be removed as part of this plan. So the access to the boathouse parking, the mayor talked about a new boathouse that is being designed. So all of that would remain. In fact, we think with some realignments of where the roadways are into Harbor Park, the DOT is considering removing the on-ramp to Route 9. In there, it would free up space for maybe even a little bit more parking adjacent to Route 9. So you might end up with more than what you have today. Yes.
Okay, so the small amount of parking in our area, our new footprint area, is it gonna be the black asphalt? Or is it asphalt it absorbs? No, and I'm talking from the environmental perspective, it absorbs. So, is it possible that it's lighter? I mean, I know it's gonna be small.
There are a lot of different options out there for more environmentally friendly parking lots. Ones that actually absorb that water. Some of them are open paver systems. Some of them have stormwater detention underneath. Lighter colors obviously reduce the heat island effect. I think all of those are options that are on the table. Ultimately, this will be built out, the public parking lots, by the city, and they could adopt a set of guidelines or standards for those parking lots or update the ones they have to be environmentally friendly.
That sounds good.
Yeah. Yes, in the front row.
Also, the Connecticut River is a flyway, a migratory flyway for birds, so that when we're thinking about the types of plantings that we're
Yes.
doing, so could we be considering, make sure that
Absolutely. Elaine, would you like to speak to some of the thoughts on plantings?
The garden club, the Middletown Garden Club, has so many women that really study the birds and plants and pollinator plants. And we've been fortunate that we will be talking to the DOT and they are allowing us to give our ideas. So I think it will be fine.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up on that, and we'd hope the garden club would be managing it and looking at making sure it's not done by, say, a state agency, it would be done locally.
Right here.
Has there been any thought of connecting the Harbor Park area to the island just north of the bridge, creating like a park space there and pedestrian walkways, sports fields?
That is an interesting question. Is that loud?
It did come up in a couple of the community workshops, and because it was outside of our immediate area, we didn't go into too much detail on it, but we think there's a great opportunity, at least for boat access, that you'd be able to direct people to a safe landing on the island. We know that other people are actually looking at activating the island. I think tying to any of these boat departure points or arrival points into a larger framework is what you want to do. You want to make Middletown another stop for dock and dines and for other recreational boating in the upper Connecticut River. In the back.
Yep, good morning. So first of all, thank you, and I already appreciate that you guys are prioritizing things, so we start immediately see benefits. And one of the questions I have is that this is a huge project, and as you can see, there's a lot of interest here. So are there plans to report out and give pulse checks to the community on how things are going? And if yes, how often should we expect that?
Definitely, and thank you for that question. And there's a part of me, and I didn't say this at the beginning, that I feel sometimes a little bit self-conscious about presenting where we're at in this master planning process, because I think that for many, many years, for a generation, people have been waiting to see shovels go in the ground. People have been waiting to see the action that has been talked about for so long. And I think that what we have tried to prioritize with this process, knowing that it is going to be a long process that is really a continuation of an ongoing long process, that we would have to basically bring people in to the behind the scenes elements that do take a long time relative to maybe what people are expecting to see. I do feel like we have been able to make some tangible progress on some of the items that were talked about on the slide, and I'm grateful to see the continuing interest, but my priority and our goal here is to err always on the side of more info and more more updates and more input back from the community. So we had two sort of major community workshops on the input gathering side of things that occurred. They're spaced maybe about 8 months apart. Interspersed with those were a number of the sort of smaller one-on-one meetings, small group meetings, individual stakeholder and demographic group meetings that the consultant team was leading. I expect that we will continue in the same trajectory with a slightly different, rather than meeting with small groups necessarily to get input, we will be trying to follow up with plans for individual sites that are chronologically important, and then on a couple of times a year, try to get together the community at large in a setting like this, here at City Hall, down at the riverfront, in accessible places, to hear an update on on where we are in the process and how plans are moving along. And that will also continue, as Mark talked about, through the legislative document adoption process. And so that will happen at the Planning and Zoning Commission. It'll happen through regular meetings of city agencies, and we'll be getting that out on the Riverfront website as well as the city website on what those are going to look like.
There were actually some questions from our attendees on WebEx, one of which was understanding that these are high-level concepts. Once we get closer to design work, how can members of the public submit new input, and what's the best way for them to communicate with the planning?
I'll let Mike take a stab at that if you're okay, but I also want to thank Bree for helping to, on the ones and twos, our Director of Information Services, and thank you to everybody who is joining us virtually as well. So,
thanks. Mayor, jump in here if I miss anything, but these projects would be like any other projects that would come to the city, where the Planning and Zoning Commission would opine on them. There would be an opportunity for the public to review on them. They would not happen outside of any of the normal development review procedures, right?
No, thank you, and I just want to add that any of the public improvements that are shown here, they would most likely require council support, so there'll be opportunities to address them at the council level, at the Planning and Zoning Commission level, and as we move forward with various projects, projects that are going to be shown on the ground. We're going to, we'll make sure that we're providing enough information, posting information on our websites, satisfying all our notice requirements, and really make sure that there's plenty of opportunity for the public to continue to weigh in, provide input, support, and whatever they want to offer for input. And I just do want to extend, if you have any more questions after we leave here today, or you want to send some messages, I just suggest you can go to talk to me in the land use office, or Bobby Peterson in economic development, or Mayor Florsheim in his office. I'm sure he'd be happy to address more comments. But so we are available to talk about this. We're all very excited to talk about this. And I do want to just note that the hard plan document is posted on the website, and so that's you can view that and download it at your convenience. So thanks.
Yes.
Two questions. First is, it might be a little early for this, but are there any cost estimates to any pieces of this project?
There are cost estimates in that we developed financial feasibility models for the private development that was shown. With inputs from the local development community, projections of where the market is today for various uses, residential, commercial space, et cetera. And so all of the developments that you're shown came back as absolutely viable in terms of today's construction cost, rent, expected rents, et cetera. So there were cost estimates done in that regard. For the public space, no. There were not cost estimates done for some of the park spaces and other public improvements. That would come at a later phase when the design is more evolved.
Is all the remediation that you
Is very much in process. As the mayor mentioned, there's an EPA grant that the city is currently making use of to study the various different brownfields in the area. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Just briefly, yeah, so that we are still at the beginning of the remediation process, but we're off to a very good start because we had secured, it was at the end of the last administration, Mayor Drew's administration, that the city applied, and then we were able to secure a grant from the EPA to assess and determine the amount of remediation that will be required at the Jackson Corrugated, Peterson Oil, OMO sites, the post-industrial sites that we just heard about. And those EPA dollars are usually granted to projects that the EPA later wants to fund remediation for. These are prime developable and community use spaces. So it will be a time-consuming process to get them remediated, but we feel confident about working with the state and federal government to get those dollars in place. So in the back.
Regarding flood preparations, can you talk briefly about what kind of considerations you've made for like low type of flooding, maybe 2 to 3 feet, and then potentially for down the road, like maybe up to 12 feet? What kind of considerations have you made?
That was something that we really looked closely at early on. We understand the Connecticut River, even this far up, is tidal. There are no really accurate projections for what sea level rise could be this far up the river, but with our engineering partners at Langen, we took our best stab at what they may be, and we designed the spaces all along the riverfront to be able to adequately protect whatever development may happen on the land side of it. We looked at the shoreline conditions, where there was good existing riprap and revetment that could protect the shoreline as the waters do rise or in flood events, and made general recommendations about where that could be improved, where living shorelines could be introduced to help soften some of the shorelines. So we did make projections about what sea level rise could be. The development itself was set back from the shoreline to be able to protect itself from any of those risks. Buildings that are down in the floodplain today were recommended to be hardened or elevated. So there were general recommendations about how to protect both the open spaces and the developments from the risk, albeit ones that we couldn't really define in any detail at this point yet, just because the data has not been put together by the agencies who typically do that. The seasonal flooding, yes, again, there were general recommendations for how the landscape should be, over time, reintroduced to be flood-tolerant landscapes. The shorelines should be hardened and as a response in particularly vulnerable areas. We looked at the Peterson Oil site as a major opportunity to widen the berth of the Sumner River, create extra capacity for the water to go as development occurs on the shoreline. So there's some larger riverfront, I'd say district-wide strategies for where you can increase the capacity for water to be during flood events, and also more targeted strategies for shorelines, vulnerable landscapes, and for buildings themselves.
We have another online question. Given that there is proposed housing with this master plan, what is the population goals and how much do we want to grow? Is there a maximum population size to the city being considered in conjunction with the plan in order to ensure sufficient city services and quality of life?
That is a great question, and I'll pass it to you in a second, because part of what CARP, our economic development partners, approach towards this project was to sort of study the next 20 years of what Middletown is going to look like in terms of population, in terms of services. We know right now that we have an extreme demand for rental housing. We have a housing shortage statewide. We have a housing shortage that's affecting Middletown, and we have extraordinary demand again for more rental units in town, specifically in the downtown area. As folks who have been following along know, we have quite a bit of housing development underway presently that is going to add to our rental housing stock in the downtown area. And this is going to be sort of a continuation of that in many ways. We have the study. I'll let Mike and perhaps others speak to that a little bit more. We do see marginal increases in the population for Middletown over the next 20 years. We just had our 10-year census in 2020, and Middletown's population basically remained right where it was. It grew very slightly. It increased significantly in most demographic categories in terms of population, except for school-aged children, where it declined pretty significantly, leaving us with basically a net even. And that sort of is instructive for the demographics that we're going to be seeing going forward. It is instructive for both the challenges and opportunities that we're going to have. Do you want to speak more a little bit to what CARP found, or if you?
Yeah. As I mentioned in the presentation, we looked out the next 20 years of what the expected population increase would be in Middletown, and tried to judge that against what we understood were the deficiencies, or I should say the need for housing downtown today. And what the conclusion was that over the next 20 years, somewhere around 1,000 units of downtown housing would be needed. They wouldn't necessarily all be in this study area. Some of it, of course, in downtown itself. But we thought our analysis revealed that it was somewhere in the order of 1,000 units of housing downtown, with a real need for affordable housing and first-time home buyer opportunities.
What's the projected cost for the remediation?
The projected cost for the remediation that's what our EPA study is looking at right now. We don't have a number for the exact cost yet. We know it would be substantial, and we know that we would require federal support and grants to get that done. For environmental remediation, again, that is really what we have the study in place to find out. The cost for that study is about $300,000. That's a grant from the federal government that the city was awarded through a competitive process, and I don't want to quote before we have determinative numbers, but we know it'll be in the millions, and we know that it will be a project that we'll have to get that competitive funding from EPA. All right here.
Discussion for years about Route 9 changes. So what I was wondering is, will there be some coordination of effort with the changes that are proposed in the Route 9 development with this?
Yeah, it's a really important question, and the coordination. There has been coordination at this point. There will continue to be coordination, as Larry just was sort of saying to me. I think that in many ways it's the right thing to look at these as the same project, because they are so closely interrelated. Because the fate of one is going to affect the outcome of the other, and because it was, in many ways, Route 9 and the existence of a highway that prevented access for for Middletown residents to the riverfront in the first place. The expansion of what was a local road into a state highway, into an elevated structure, is one of the challenges that now we have to overcome to reconnect. And so it was DOT, actually, it was the state who first was suggesting the pedestrian bridge as an elegant solution to get people from downtown over Route 9 into the riverfront. And there were concepts for that were not going to work well for Middletown, and we worked with, again, a goal of this team was to work with DOT on the front end, with the state of Connecticut on the front end, to determine what that should look like. Mike mentioned there is a plan now underway that is moving forward to close the on-ramp at Harbor Drive next to the former canoe club to make that a much more pedestrian-friendly area, as we said, expand room for potential additional parking and development of that site, and will also improve traffic conditions for where people are getting on and off Route 9. So that is going to be a hand-in-glove process. I'm really glad that we took that approach, because there is always opportunities for state and local interests to be at loggerheads with projects like this. That is what has kept Route 9 from moving forward. It's what's kept the riverfront from moving forward in many respects in the past. And so seeing it as a seamless project, I think, is going to be really important. I think we got time for one more. Yeah, Councilman.
If I may, as part of the flood remediation, debris diversion, this part of the river has a very, very strong current. Once it passes that bridge, we've seen large trees, we've seen a lot of material that has gone down, and your wonderful concepts that you have put out, I would just hope that you would have this debris diversion plan in place along with the flooding. But that to me is more concerning than the flooding part of it, because it can destroy what we built up on that river. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, I think we got time for one more, Council.
Just a practical question. I know Mayor said the plan will be on the city website. The deck that was presented this morning, will that be available anywhere for people to?
We can definitely get that up there. Yeah. So, and that'll be at middletownct.gov/Riverbend, as well as on our main page. All right. We'll try to we'll get these questions. We'll try to answer them quickly. So we'll go Patty and then Marty.
Is there going to be 1245 trolley too?
Great question.
Yes, I see, yeah. Yes.
That's still on?
Yes, that's the second one. Alan's saying there may be a few spaces left on the 1245. Alan, if you raise your hand, if you're interested in going on a trolley, he is managing the attendees.
And Marty, your question.
Yeah, my question was about the trolley buses, because I didn't even know I was signed up. So there are two, and I'm going to try to give space, but if I don't, will there be talking on the trolley? So if I was in my car, I could just park behind the bus, and I can hear everything.
So I'm going to give the mic. Tom, do you want to chat about the? I'm going to give the mic to Tom real quick.
The mayor said that we're meeting at Matt. I guess I'm retired, so I can correct the mayor.
Thank you.
We're actually meeting at the park, so come down there to meet the bus. To your question, we are staying on the bus. There are a couple of stops. There'll be like 5-minute stops where Mike will be holding up one of these concepts, and then you're going to see what's there now and then look at the concepts. I don't think that we can really accommodate, the on the bus, off the bus. But it's just come down. We'll try to fit you on there, and not all the staff has to be on there. Okay, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Tom. So just to repeat, so right now everybody is invited to join us at the Riverfront workshop at Main Street Market. At 12 o'clock, we will have our first tour bus leaving from Harbor Park, not from Matt, but from Harbor Park. At 12:45, the second tour bus will be leaving from there. If you have, there are a couple of seats if you want to try to grab them. Grab Alan out front. And I just want to say thank you again to this amazing team, to this amazing community for being here. Where in Harbor Park?
80 Harbor Park.
At the Canoe Club, so in the parking lot by 80 Harbor Drive at the former Canoe Club. Thank you so much, everybody. This will be an ongoing process. Glad to have you here. Looking forward to continuing the work. Thank you. Thank you. You too. That was awesome.